Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today I'm back with part 2 of What If Carley and Doug Survived. We left off season 1 with a pretty cool split ending path, and so now with part 2 we'll be following it up and covering all of season 2. So if you haven't already seen part 1, make sure you check it out using the link in the description and comments section. But for those of you that are ready to see the continuation of the story, let's go ahead and get into it now. After the events of Season 1, Clementine is left with either Krista, Omid, and Carley, or Kenny, Katja, and Duck, with potentially Ben joining them on the boat. So Season 2's intros would change depending on which one your Clementine had. In the first one, Carley would likely be keeping watch outside the bathroom, or would be in the women's room with Clem. Either way, this would prevent Michelle from killing Omid. First of all, she might not even show up since Carley is either there guarding or just an additional person Michelle would have seen enter the bathroom. It's a lot easier to jump a little kid than an armed adult and a little kid. And if she did show up, she'd either try and jump Carley and fail, resulting in Carley being forced to shoot her, or she'd play nice and try to join the group. In the second version, she'd be able to join but would end up stealing from them at night, and probably shoot Omid after he sees her. In my opinion, I see this as what would happen, as I doubt she's that stupid to try and fight a woman with a gun. But it would be a cool moment for Carley, as she'd have to kill someone for the first time. Sadly, I don't see any choice Clementine could make that would change this. It's not like she knew Michelle, so it'd just be whichever ones the writers choose. And since I'm the writer, we're gonna go with the one where she stays with the group, steals from them, Omid dies, and then Krista probably shoots her, or she escapes. Going forward, we'd reach the same point where Clem and Krista are in the woods, but now Carley is there too. Krista wouldn't really blame Clementine for Omid's death since she had nothing to do with it, but she is still heavily wounded by what happened. Also, Carley being there definitely doesn't change the odds of Krista's baby being born that much, so I'm gonna say she still loses it. Carley definitely relates to Krista's loss as it's a very similar situation to her own with Doug, but Krista also losing the baby is the final nail that just keeps her distant. And so she leaves to find more wood while Carley stays with Clementine to get a fire going. The two talk briefly, but it's cut short when they hear some voices in the distance. They see Krista being surrounded after investigating, and Carley wants to help her, but she doesn't have any ammo due to the harsh life she'd been living. However, she's kept a souvenir from Doug, the laser pointer. She tells Clementine to leave just in case things go bad, but Clementine can choose whether or not to go. Carley uses the laser pointer to blind one of the dudes, and Clem throws a rock at another one if she's there. After that, Carley books it, but if Clem was there too, we don't hear Krista getting hit, so maybe she survives. Anyway, Carley eventually gets separated from Clementine during the chase. Clem either already left, or Carley defends Clem from their assailant. Clem then gets attacked by walkers, causing her to fall down the river and float downstream. Now in the other timeline, Clem is on the boat with Kenny's family and maybe Ben, but some tragedy occurs, whether that be walkers attacking the boat, or maybe this is after they left the boat since it's not going to last forever. The point is, if Ben is there, he gets killed, as if we kept him around, he'd change too much of the story for me to keep up with two branching paths of the whole season. And let's face it, Telltale would probably not put a guy who can survive Season 1 into its Season 2 cast. It'd just be too much work when they could simply just kill him off before the time skip. Don't believe me? Look at Season 3's endings. And remember that the Clementine comic takes place away from the school so that they don't have to show us the characters who may have survived. Anyway, this event causes Clementine to be separated from Kenny and his family, and despite their efforts, they wouldn't be able to find her. She ends up out on her own until she eventually ends up finding a dog in the forest. This would be our connecting point from the two timelines. And yes, it's very unlikely that she'd end up in the same spot she did canonically, despite being on a boat for a long time and going somewhere completely different, but we need the story to continue, so suspend your disbelief a little. The dog turns feral, biting her on the arm, and she runs around the forest until she's met by Pete and Luke. From here, pretty much everything plays out the same way it did in canon, up until episode 2, where Clementine reunites with Kenny. But this time, it isn't just him. Katja and Duck are there too. This is very interesting, as it means Sarita is just a part of the group now. She's a friend Kenny and his family met at some point along the road. Clem and Duck reuniting would be awesome, as both have been good friends up until their point of separation. It seems like everything is falling into place, and things are going right. And the most important change is that Duck is there to actually pass Kenny that can.
Pass me that can, Duck.
Eventually, the wind turbine goes out, causing the group to scramble together a plan on what to do. Now, originally, Sarita wanted to go check on the Transformer, but Kenny refused the request in order to protect her. However, since he's not in a relationship with her and has been willing to enlist the help from women he's not with before, such as Carley and Bree, I think he'd allow her to come with. The rest of the group battles the walkers, with Katja and Duck mostly staying out of it, since they've just not had much experience fighting yet. Kenny kept them safe on the boat, and after that, they met Sarita and eventually Walter and Matthew. This means that since we lost one person defending the group from walkers, Sarita, Walter's decision of saving Nick doesn't really matter. Someone is likely to die, and in canon, Nick came the closest, since he literally can in the game. So I'm just gonna say that he dies either way, even if Walter tries to save him. Anyway, Carver's group arrives, gunning down the walkers and holding our gang hostage. Katja and Duck are upstairs with Alvin and Rebecca since they stayed inside the whole time. They discuss the fact that Kenny, Luke, and Sarita are still out there, and that Carver doesn't know about Katja and Duck yet. So the two of them can leave and go find the others. Clementine can then choose to go with them, or go downstairs to prevent further harm to Carlos. Kenny and Sarita are quickly found by Katja, Duck, and potentially Clementine, who join them at their scouting points. The two are aiming guns and choose to both fire. Kenny's shot hits the same guy it did canonically, killing him, while Sarita hits Troy non-fatally. Carver gets angry at the attack and swiftly guns down Walter and shoots Carlos in the hand, matching the death and injury. He then offers them to surrender, which they all have different feelings about. Kenny is outraged about Walter's death and the fact that this Carver dude just took his home. But his family and the rest of his group is out here with him. He doesn't know any of the others. He suggests they just escape, but both Sarita and Katja are against this, as they don't think it's right to let these innocent people be taken. Clem picks a side, but Kenny reluctantly gives in and agrees to continue shooting. Kenny fires another shot that hits Carver in the shoulder, while Sarita misses her next shot. This means Alvin is gunned down next, unless Clementine is there and saves him, which leads to Kenny turning himself in. But he tells Sarita and his family to escape, as he sadly says goodbye to Duck. Now, if Clementine isn't there to save him, Kenny would likely just continue firing, but I'll say Sarita is out of ammo now just to keep things simple. Kenny attempts another shot, and Clem can choose to grab the gun or let him shoot. This time, his shot just misses, as all of Carver's group is now on high alert and are going for cover. So now we have to determine what Carver would do next. He's got the choice of Carlos, Rebecca, and Sarah as who he should pick to hold at gunpoint. The most logical option here is Sarah, as she's a child, so Kenny would probably stop or be convinced to by Katja and Sarita. He would then turn himself in, but Clem would have to go as well since Carver knows she's with the group. Plus, there were two shooters. I'm sure they wouldn't want Clem to go, but they know that they're way more likely to be chased down if Clem runs off with them. This is the best option. Kenny says goodbye to his family, and he and Clem enter the lodge while Sarita, Katja, and Duck escape. After that, just about everything in the first half of episode 3 happens the same. The only difference is being that Nick is dead in all versions, and there's no Sarita because she's with Katja and Duck. When Luke grabs Clementine, he tells her that he met up with Sarita and Kenny's family, and that they're heading to Parker's Run, which is a nearby location that his group knows about. The plan with the radios happens, Luke is captured, and Kenny is beaten down. After that, our group takes down Carver with the help of Bonnie, Mike, and Jane, and escapes inside the herd. But we have a change here. Our group is actually smaller now since Sarita is away, so we've got two possible options. Nobody else dies, or we choose a different person. Carlos is still getting shot for sure, but that leaves us with Clem, Kenny, Luke, Sarah, Rebecca, Mike, Jane, and Bonnie. Sarah is out of the picture due to her running off. Rebecca, Kenny, Luke, and Mike were all not present until after Sarita got bit, so our options are cut down to Jane, Bonnie, and Clementine. And honestly, out of all these three, it's clear who's drawing the most attention. Bonnie. She's firing her gun repeatedly, which should draw most walkers aggroed onto Sarita toward her. Her gun is able to defend pretty well, but as soon as she needs to reload, it's over, and she's bitten on the wrist. Clementine can choose to cut her hand off or kill the walker. If you cut her hand off, she gets eaten by the walkers, but if you don't, then she continues on with the bite. Pretty much the exact same as Sarita. She ends up making it to Parker's Run, but I don't see her surviving the bite here. Kenny knew Sarita was bitten canonically and didn't try cutting her arm off, which he definitely would have tried if he thought it was possible to save her. So that leaves us with the conclusion that it was probably too late, and if it's too late for Sarita, it's most likely too late for Bonnie. Very unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Since Kenny isn't distracted by Sarita dying / being dead, he takes charge on what they should do. Sarita and Mike agree to start scouting, while Kenny's family stays with Bonnie and Rebecca. Clementine and Jane leave to go find Luke and Sarah, which goes the same as it did canonically. By the time they arrive, Bonnie has been put down by Kenny if she was there, which is sad news for Luke. The history exhibit was already looked at by Mike and Sarita, so now all that's left is the observation deck. Clementine and Jane check that out, where they find Arvo, and all that goes the same too. The only difference is that Luke going with Jane doesn't screw the group, since Sarita would be keeping watch. This means they're able to detect the walkers sooner and escape to the observation deck. Some walkers follow, but not as many, leading to Sarah surviving and Rebecca's baby being born with the help of Katja and Kenny. The group then argues over staying or leaving sooner, but by that point, Jane has already left. It is considerably less hostile between Kenny and Luke, since, like I said, Luke didn't really do much wrong. Eventually, our gang leaves and are attacked by Arvo's group. Rebecca turns and is put down by either Kenny or Clementine, starting the gunfight. Now in canon, our group consisted of 5 people: Clementine, Kenny, Luke, Mike, and Bonnie. But now Bonnie is gone, leaving the other 4, plus Sarita, Katja, Duck, and potentially Sarah. That's 7 or 8 people in a close-up gunfight, so it's more likely for someone to die during this. Now Sarita is essentially taking Bonnie's place, so I don't see her dying here, as Bonnie didn't die in canon, and that leaves Katja, Duck, and Sarah, if she's there. Katja would obviously be defending the kids, so I think she's the most likely candidate to die, which would be very sad. But we've held off Kenny's grief for 2 seasons now, with Katja not dying in Season 1 and Sarita not dying in Season 2, so I guess we're gonna have Katja die here. Kenny and Duck would both be broken over this, with Kenny grabbing Arvo as a shield. Luckily, Jane kills the last enemy before it comes to Arvo being shot, ending the battle. Kenny then runs over to his wife to see her bleeding out, and trying everything he can to keep her alive, but to no avail. Sarita and the others attempt to comfort her and Duck, but he ignores them, or blows up at them if they didn't listen to him about leaving immediately. He beats up Arvo, which the group tries to stop, especially Sarita, who's the closest to him. Meanwhile, Duck is just crying the whole time, not knowing how to process what's going on with his mother dying and his father going insane. Arvo tells them about the house that he knows about, so they head in that direction. They end up stopping at a power plant, and Clementine has to get Kenny and Duck to rejoin the group at the fire. It'd just be some comforting dialogue telling them you're here for them. Sarah will still be silent no matter what, as she's still shaken over everything that happened. Katja did just die for her, basically. The next day, they continue their trek toward the house and have a long walk along the frozen lake. Luke gets stuck, but since Sarita would have been with Duck after Kenny chases Arvo down, it means only Clementine and potentially Sarah are there. But Sarah wouldn't really know what to do, leaving it up to Clementine to either try and cover Luke or help him. Either way, it fails, and Luke drowns, with Clem barely making it back up after she went in after him. And maybe you could even say that Sarah falls in like Bonnie did because she tries to help, and then you get to choose whether or not to break the ice and save Sarah. Kenny probably doesn't beat down on Arvo here, since he cares less about the rest of the group, and he still has a son. So Luke dying isn't a huge deal to him anyway. Jane finds the food Arvo told them about, and Clem takes a nap. Kenny then gets to work on the truck, and Sarita expresses her inability to picture Kenny going down a dark path. And after hearing what he did to Carver, she worries more for what he will become, and what could happen to Duck if he doesn't get his head straight. Clem talks to Duck as well, who is also concerned for his dad, but is still grieving heavily over his mother. Clem helps Kenny with the truck before going back in. Kenny eventually gets it working, and the group argues over where they're gonna go. Kenny's son being there definitely does add credibility of him choosing where to go, but the rest of the group isn't fond of the Wellington idea, besides Sarita and maybe Clementine. Kenny flips out in the truck, and Duck goes to talk to his dad, only to hear his rant in place of Clem. Later that night, Clementine wakes up to see Arvo and Mike attempting to leave the group. Mike tries to talk her down, but Arvo shoots her with a rifle, waking everyone up. They run out to see a bleeding Clementine, and immediately get in the truck to leave. With Sarita and Kenny both wanting to go to Wellington, Jane would be kind of outvoted, but Sarita is sympathetic of her idea of going back to Howe's. It would be a good place to stop by and grab supplies. Kenny refuses to hear this though, and they eventually get stopped by the huge wall of cars. Kenny angrily exits the truck, telling Duck to stay back while he looks for some fuel. However, walkers show up, forcing the group to drive off. Jane would be the one driving since Clem was only a last resort. Jane knows how to drive, so she is able to avoid the walkers, making it to the rest stop. Kenny arrives shortly after, and they continue the argument over where to go. But with the harsh environment, Sarita wants to go to Howe's for sure. Wellington can wait until after they're fully stocked up. Now Jane and Sarita are both against Kenny, with Duck blindly agreeing with his dad, while Clem chooses for herself. No matter what, Kenny is outvoted. So he opts to take Duck and AJ with him to find Wellington, but Sarita doesn't think it's a good idea. They should all stick together. Jane doesn't really care either way, and Clementine has 3 choices. She can agree to the split up but keep AJ, she can ask to leave with Kenny, or she can ask Kenny to come with them. These choices will determine the ending of the game. If you leave with Kenny and Duck, you end up at Wellington where he begs Edith to take the kids. But since they were barely willing to take Clem and AJ, Duck being there ruins things. He obviously prioritizes Duck over Clementine, but this is the moment where Duck finally makes his own choice. He doesn't want to leave his father, and so Clem can go in with AJ or leave with Kenny and Duck. Going with Sarita and Jane leads to them ending up at Howe's, where they either let in the family or not. Not doing it will please Jane but upset Sarita. It seems like on this path they've given up a lot of hope in humanity. Also, Sarah would be with them if you kept her alive to the end. And lastly, if you convinced Kenny to come with you to Howe's, then you'd arrive and still let the family in or not, but Kenny overrides your choice and lets them in anyway. It's a husband, wife, and their son, just like his family. And it also kind of makes a note of how keeping Kenny with the group kind of destroys things a little bit, as they don't even get to choose for themselves. But with that, that's going to be all for Season 2 and Part 2 of What If Carley and Doug Survived. I know Carley wasn't in this part hardly at all because I really couldn't find a way to write her back into the story without it being super contrived. I could have had her show up, but why would she be there if she was in a completely different place? I don't know. And she wouldn't have really added much to the story, let's be honest. So I'm going to add her back in Season 3 and we'll see what changes she made there. But yeah, let me know if you guys like this video, and if you do, then consider becoming a channel member like these awesome people here. Kyler Fiend, Ellie DePlug 2, Wax and Parrotfish, Paul Keen, Funklocks, Hazy Brush, Hayden Banks, Scintillating Susie, Roderick Hare, Marco DeCinco, and Raven. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and if you want to do the same and also get access to awesome perks like priority comment replies and exclusive community posts, make sure you become a channel member for just $2.99 a month. But as always, tell me if you like this part, tell me what you think will happen next, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.